So that happened. Hey guys, it's Emily from ARC Schooling, and today I'm going to bring you a post-election book list. I don't want to get into politics too much here because I just don't want to go there. Needless to say though, I know a lot of people are very disappointed and saddened and just it's a rough day today. So I thought that I would literally the first thing I thought about was there's a lot of really important books that people should read, and some of them are maybe not books you would immediately think of as being reading to combat what is happening right now, but just hear me out. Okay. So I'm going to share with you some books that I think will help both to get us through and also to educate. So I'm going to start with an obvious choice, and that is Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And this book is about African immigrants to America and that experience of being not only a person of color, but a person of color from another country, and learning how to cope with being in America and all the things that you take for granted that make sense to you, that are so foreign to other people who haven't grown up with it. And I appreciated that perspective so much from this book, because you do take so much for granted, and especially if you're not a person of color, this book is so important in that aspect, and I highly recommend reading it. Did I love the story? Not so much, but that's my preference. But the overall message of the book, I think, is more important than the story. I recommend that you read Americanah so you can see through other people's eyes what it is to be an immigrant to America. The next book I want to talk about is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, and this is literally the first book that popped into my head because, of course it is. So the reason I would recommend this book post-election is because it shows how ordinary people can aspire to help in any way that they can, to fight against the tyranny and to fight against the horrible things that they see happening. You don't have to sit back and take it. You can fight it. And I loved this book for that. I love Hans Huberman and how he was able to show Liesel that ordinary people can do their part to change things. I love Max, the Jew that they took into hiding. I love how he shows Liesel that even when you think things are at their worst, things can be better because there's a future. There's young people who will grow up to do great things. And I love Liesel because even though she is thrust into this horrible world, she can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and she fights for it. And I love this book. This book is about humanity at its darkest moments and how it shines through that. And I'm getting all verklempt. I recommend reading Lord of the Rings because, sometimes you need to just know that good does triumph over evil. And there will always be people that can fight the evil in the darkest of times to show the way through, and the smallest people, the people you don't expect, are the ones that can actually fight it. And I love it. I love Lord of the Rings. It's always my go-to comfort reading. This next book, I'm going to be honest, I've only read bits and pieces of it, but now I feel like I need to read the whole thing through. It's going to happen. And that is Lies My Teacher Told Me. Everything your American history textbook got wrong. I got this mostly from my daughter when she was studying U.S. history a year ago, and I kind of picked up here and there and read a little bit at a time, but I think that this is such an important aspect of combating tyranny and combating the racism and misogyny and all of that is happening right now. Because if you know our history, if you know history in general, not just American history, but world history, then you can combat it because you can see it coming. You can be aware that it is about to happen and you can stop it before it does. And I think actually this is one of our biggest problems in our country at this moment in time, is that so many people don't know history. They don't know because they're not taught it in school, or they're taught a very whitewashed version of it. And so I think everybody should study up on their history and know what our country is really about. Next, I want to recommend I Am Malala, the girl who stood up for education and was shot by the Taliban, because Malala is amazing. And honestly, this book is so important, I think, because it shows that Muslims are people too. They're not all terrorists. Muslims are not terrorists. Terrorists are terrorists. You can't combine them all into one group. And I think Malala's message is just so important. And she is such an amazing role model for everybody, not just for girls, but for everybody. She is such a strong, amazing person. And the thought that she would be forbidden to come into our country just because she's Muslim makes me so angry. For children, I would recommend reading Molly's Pilgrim right now. Get this book, read it to your kids. It's super duper short. It's literally like 30 pages, I think. It's a very short, sweet story. It's by Barbara Cohen, and it's all about a little girl who is an immigrant from Russia. Her family has just come to America, and so she's adjusting to that. And her class assignment for Thanksgiving is to create a little pilgrim to bring into to school and decorate the classroom with. And Molly doesn't quite understand what that means. She knows a little bit, so she goes to her mother for help, and her mother designs this pilgrim for her, and that looks just like her. That looks like a little Russian. And when she brings it to school, everyone makes fun of her, but the teacher's like, no, stop. Guess what? The Pilgrims were immigrants because they were coming to America to seek freedom for practicing their religious beliefs, just like the little Jewish girl from Russia who is coming to America to seek freedom for her religious beliefs. Immigrants are not villains. They're not scary. They're just people who see this great country and they want to be a part of it. And so they come any way they can. And sometimes maybe it's not the legal way to do it, but you know, can you really blame them? If you lived in a horrible country with no freedoms and war, and you don't want that for your children, so you do what you have to do. And I can't blame people for that. So I think this is a good book to read to your children. Finally, I want to recommend Nation by Terry Pratchett. I know this one doesn't sound like it belongs here. This is sort of a fantastical-ish story in that it's not our world, it's a fantasy version of our world. And it's about two people, a girl and a boy, and the girl is from England. In her part of the world, there's been a plague, and her father is in line for the throne, but he's like 300 people away from the throne or something ridiculous like that. I can't remember the exact number. I want to see he's like 137th from the throne. But there's been a big plague, so her father's now the first in line for succession. But she's on ship on the other side of the world, and she shipwrecks on this island that has been devastated by a typhoon, and the only person there is Mal, a boy who is on his journey to become a man. In his society, you have to go to this island, you have to complete this task and come back, and when you come back, you become a man. So he was in the midst of that when the typhoon struck, so when he comes back home, there's no one there to complete the ceremony. His whole family, his whole world is gone. And this book is all about questioning your beliefs and questioning what you believe was right, and why did you believe it was right? Is it really right? And I think that that is such an important thing to share with our children. You should always question. You should never just accept things blindly. And I've always encouraged my children to think it through, like, well, why do you believe that? And this book really resonates with me because of that, because it's also about science. It's about being a scientist and wanting to know why things are the way they are, and it's so pro-science, and I think that's another aspect that is really important today, that so many people don't understand science, and they're not pro-science, and they just accept blindly what other people tell them. And yeah, I really love this book. Terry Pratchett is a genius. He wrote this when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and he knew that he was coming up to his end, and he wrote this amazing book, and I highly recommend reading this right now. So those are the books I recommend to get you through the post-election blues, and maybe to inspire you and others to really think and to question and to want better for our world, for our children. So that is all I have for you today. I'm going to go cry in a corner now. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.